and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on this show. This is episode number 24, and today we have a power couple as our guest, and they are going to talk about love and happier marriage and what's love got to do with it. Let me say this, you might be triggered by some of what you will hear on this episode, but remember, that is one of the purpose of this show, to stir things up and then take you in for a safe landing. This show is brought to you by kingsgrant.com. Our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode. Stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Podcast. Today, our guests and I will be talking about love and marriage and what's love got to do with having a happier marriage. If you are old enough, you'll remember that the music icon Tina Turner produced one of the most iconic songs of our century called What's Love Got to Do? Got to do. I'm going to have to try to sing that. What's love got to do with it? The story, of course, emerged from her own relationship with her late husband, Ike Turner, which she had to leave because he was a very abusive husband. And this song kind of was birthed from that experience that she had. But let me tell you about this show will not be about Tina Turner, right? Don't expect to hear anything more about her than just what you heard just now, because this episode will concentrate on topics that this couple, who you're going to be introduced to in a few moments, will talk about love and forgiveness and decision making and parenting and a whole lot more. Now, you may not agree with all that you'll hear, but you can always share your thoughts through a comment or an email, which the announcer will share with you at the end of this episode. So make sure whatever you do, right? Whatever you do, agree or disagree or triggered or not, to stick around to the end because I have a special gift just for you. Thanks for joining me for this episode. As you've already heard, we're talking about love and marriage and what's love got to do with having a happier marriage. Now, to help us unpack this topic, let me introduce you to two happily married couple who have been married for over 16 years with 3 young children and their own separate careers. They are our guests today. Their names are Eddie, aka DJ Mr. E, and Yannick Jackson. I'll let them tell you more about themselves as we unpack this interview. So let me now go ahead and step out the way and introduce to you our power couple, Yannick and Eddie Jackson. Welcome to the show, Yannick and Eddie. How are you guys doing today?
We are doing great. Amazing.
Yes.
Right. Awesome. You guys have been married for 16 plus years and you have had a very loving relationship. And so, as I mentioned, what happens sometimes, people have a wrong idea of what love is. And so in your mind, Yannick, since you brought that up, what is love? How does it look from your perspective in your relationship?
What is love?
We don't want no royalties or no flags on this, so we won't say anymore.
Okay.
But as far as love, what love looks like to me, it's interesting because I have to go based on what I've experienced in love, and what the experience has been is different than what I assumed it was going to be prior to getting married. Mm-hmm. And what love has been this emotional roller coaster, in a sense of really digging deep to where I am and learning about where my husband is. And it's been a process of, okay, I love you, you love me. What does that look like, as it relates to how I'm loving you and how I'm receiving what I feel should be love? And sometimes we have to redefine or in a sense, change our thinking towards what that love language is, and sometimes in different seasons of the relationship, that's when I realized, okay, well, this is part of love, where it's the giving, you receive, but then sometimes you're so empty, you have nothing to give but the words, and same thing for the other person. They might not be able to accommodate all of your desires or heart's desires, but it's that willingness to say, in this season, in this moment, we love each other. And how can we navigate those waters, even when one of us might be empty or one of us might be full, and when we're overflowing. So not trying to be too poetic, but that's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
Of, love.
So you mentioned something, and I'm gonna come back to that. You said you had an assumption coming in. I want to ask you and Eddie, what were your assumption coming in to this relationship, even through the lens of love? What was the assumption?
Honestly, I came in with a I don't know, a fresh blank canvas ready to paint, because I've been through relationships, and most of the relationships that I've been in prior to me and Yannick started dating was very superficial. I thought it was love, but it wasn't. There was affection and there was caring, but it wasn't true love, because it was more like, how can I what can I get out of this relationship versus how can we build together? And when we started dating, I learned how can we build together and make this work versus what can I get from out of this? So when you go into a relationship or in anything, thinking what can you get out of it versus how can we build and how can we serve each other? I think that changes the whole perspective, and it helps you to grow better and helps you to work things out much easier, with that perspective in mind.
So here's the thing, Eddie, you mentioned, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because sometimes people have a different way of the story, the narrative coming into a relationship. What can I get? You're describing what can you give. Where did you learn that? I'm going to ask you both. How did you learn that? If so, maybe Yannick, you may have learned something different, but I want to ask you, where did that come from? How did you learn that about love?
Well, for me, what I saw at church, really, some of the married couples in a church that I was going to when I was a youth, so long ago.
Still a youth.
But just seeing the way how they care for each other, where we would do these like Sundays after church, and you would see how the men would serve their wife. It wasn't just the wife serving the husband, but the way they served each other, it was more of a caring way versus an obligation, where I saw how the men was doing things that people may say, oh, it's just a woman's job, or vice versa. And just seeing them actually lovingly do that. And then also seeing the bad side of it, So just going through, seeing the beauty of what a healthy relationship looks like, helped prepare my heart for it. And what I loved before we got married, shout out to Peter and Kim. They're friends of ours, and before we got married, they did almost like a marriage boot camp.
Oh,
yeah, it was so beautiful. It was them and a few other couples that we knew within our circle, but it was just a real small group, and they allowed us to invite another couple who was engaged, and they really gave us the breakdown. It was like, seriously, it was boot camp, and to this day, I don't think they realized how helpful that was, because when we started dating, we never really argued.
Yeah.
And these were couples that we looked up to, like, oh my gosh, they're perfect. They're like the perfect power couple. But when we did that boot camp, they were so honest and open about the challenges they faced. And it wasn't just surface, but they talked about the arguments and how they had to fight each other, not physically, but fight for their love as they learn how to communicate, like, okay, we need to break down the walls, and we're breaking down the egos and all these different layers. And that really helped us to be like, oh my gosh, these are people that we thought were like perfect. And like they face these challenges. So that was so helpful in helping me to go into this.
So it sounds like, Eddie, you're kind of nodding and also cited that as one of the helpful ways, or the place you can learn that as well. Would that be where this came from for you as well?
Yes, but a lot of it also is the way my upbringing. I grew up with both my parents, and I saw the way how my dad loved my mother, the way how till this day they're still married.
Wow.
Shout out to them. I think they're going on 50 years next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. But no, just the way how my parents they treat each other. My dad, he was out for months at a time providing for the household, but it wasn't something where he did it. Okay, this is my obligation, like how Yannick said. It's not out of obligation, but hey, you know what? You're my responsibility, and we're building this together. So therefore, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice myself so that way you could be okay, we could be okay when it gets to the point of me not being able to continue to work, which my dad has retired over 3 years now, and he's like, hey, you know what? We can now continue building where we left off. Because I am no longer out away from the house or away from home. We can continue and live the rest of our lives out together, loving, caring for each other and other people. So church and mainly my parents.
Awesome. So, you mentioned about this couple who are very vulnerable because they were showing to you on the outside, it seemed like everything was perfect. And their vulnerability is sharing about how they had to kind of navigate times when things were tough in their lives. And every relationship have those moments, right? And so it sounded like you were prepared, knowing through the lens of love what to look for, what to do. What about the times when you may feel like, there's something's missing, there's a disconnect. And if you had those moments, how did you work through them? What was most helpful at those times? And what was it like?
Oh, really tough. I think for us, having the conversation that we're going to dig deep in this problem, fight it out in a sense, to get to the root of what is the real issue here. Is it really this, or is it something else? Because sometimes when you face those challenges, when you think it was A, come to find out there's something so much deeper than what's being said. So it's like really taking the time to dig deep and being patient through that process, I think has helped us. And I feel like those moments that we've had, those breakthroughs, has ended up being so beautiful. I know it seems weird, but it's almost like us locked in a room and like, let's get at it. Okay, what's the problem? Boom. Oh, it's because you this and I this. And it's like, no. What's the real problem here? Is it really that? And then as we share, then we start realizing as we're speaking to each other, like, wait, the real problem is this. That issue just opened the door to kind of shed light of what's going on in the heart. It's like a heart check, a mind check, a perspective check during the season. I remember the first time it had to do with a dream. It's always been about the dream. So weird. So it's like, okay, we've been around this block before. What's the real problem? And it was where, Eddie had a dream to do something. And for me, I thought,
I still do.
Anyways, I thought in a loving way, which was a warped way to view it, was, okay, if he wants to do this particular project so bad, fine. Instead of him leaving me, which is what I thought he would leave me to do this project, I'll go ahead and give him a ticket, in a sense, to say, hey, go ahead. If you want to do this so bad, go travel out to California, do whatever you're doing. And whenever you're done with your project, come back. But I'm not supporting that because we're not in a situation to do that. And I just remember him looking at me like, it's not that serious. I can cancel the project. I wouldn't leave you for that. Right. But it was like me, in a sense, feeling I had the power to tell him to go versus him going and leaving me on his own. You know, that has to deal with just my personal bringing. And, you know, thank God there's been restoration and stuff with my family members, so I feel comfortable sharing, you know, this now, and they know that. But it's like, at that moment, I realized, I was like, what's wrong with me? And then I realized that was the reason why. It's like, okay, well, that person who's important to me left. They checked out. So I would rather give him permission to check out before he does it to me. So I remember that was like a tough.
I wasn't ready to check out.
Yeah. So there's an assumption going. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made in marriages, right, about certain things. Like you described, for example, you had a certain internal way of interpreting what this meant, and by checking in, you realize it meant something else, right? So you showed some maturity along the way. But Eddie, when that was happening, how did you manage your own emotions or manage the relationship at that moment, knowing that it wasn't what you intended or have even was trying to communicate to her, but she had that? How did you manage that moment?
I mean, it hurt because I'm like, is she hinting at something here? You know, and I was like, yeah, it's really not that serious. You know, like I prefer for us to be at peace than me out doing something and knowing that, you know, me and my wife were having, you know, at each other, you know, whether it be, you know, just a misunderstanding or whether, you know, she had the thought process of, well, hey, you go do you and I'm gonna do me, and it is what it is. You know, we worked it out. You know, communication is key. You know, so we're like, okay, well, really, like it's not that, it's really not that serious, you know. And throughout that time, you know, we've grown so much beyond that, where if situations like that was like spark back up again, like we're like, okay, we're at this again. We already know what to do. We already wrote the manual to this, so might as well, let's just go ahead and get rid of it. You know? Chapter 5, verse.
Yeah, you know, it's some couples in moments like this, they will use the word compatibility, right? They're not compatible, and so this is proof to them in their mind that this is a compatibility issue, right? So, and they will check out. That will end their marriage, right? So, when you hear, or did you have at any time that crossed your mind, or when you hear people use that word, right, to dissolve their marriage over something like that, what's your thoughts on that? How would you speak to those issues? And did that ever cross your mind about a compatibility issue?
Oh, you want to go?
I'll let you go first.
No, honestly, I mean, like, I really believe that ever since we were friends, and emotions started to build, I felt in my heart like, hey, you know what, I think this is something that can grow into something beautiful. I think that she could be the one that I spend the rest of my life with. There was a lot of things where we're like, okay, you know what? Yes, we are compatible because we're both into the arts and entertainment, you know, field, and we are both working towards accomplishing similar goals in maybe different arenas or different lanes, but we're working towards the same outcome. And I've never really seen it as, you know what, we may not be compatible, but we've had situations where moments may not have been the right time, and our compatibility for situations might have been very frictionated, and if that's even a word, very.
We'll make it a word tonight.
We kind of rub hard against each other because it's like, yeah, this ain't really working. Like, you want to go left, I want to go right, you know, and we're not getting anywhere here. But as it relates to us together as a unit, no, I've never really seen us as not compatible. However, something that somebody mentioned one time, a pastor mentioned one time, is that you have people who God will bring them together, and you may be from the window, outside window, looking at this relationship, like, how in the world do you all even, you know, manage to be together? It's like, you're type A, you're very, you know, reserved, laid back, but they kind of work.
Yes.
And what we would look at from a third party person looking and say, like, they're not compatible, it works for them. You know? And I think that's the beauty of when God brings people together, it's like you have one whole complementing another whole. I don't like when they say, oh, you're a better half or this half. No, we are one whole unit, another whole unit, meshing together to become a bigger whole unit. So, yeah.
Okay.
Is there time for me to touch on that?
Yes, I'd like for you to touch on that from a female perspective, because that tend to be where I hear that some doesn't mean it's a gender kind of conversation. It comes both ways, but who brings the most sound in the first place is the female. So I would like to hear your perspective on that.
Okay. So when I hear couples share their frustration about, oh, we're no longer compatible, or we're just growing apart or whatever, it really boils down to the understanding of what I've experienced recently, I should say, is the support system, where that person might not support you like they did before. Their support might look different, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. That doesn't mean the love has ended. We just have to figure out ways to still express our love, but it might look different than before. And that's something that we experience. And I know for me, I was like, okay, is this what could break our relationship just because of whether he doesn't support me in this area, I don't support him? And it's like looking at the bigger picture. Okay, out of 30 things that you've experienced such beautiful relationship and great support, that one area, you're telling me you're going to allow that one area to cloud your judgment of all the other things that is beautiful about your relationship? And we got to that point where we're like, okay, fine. If this is something that is, and it's like putting in layers. Okay, why don't you want to do this particular project? Or why don't you want me to do this? Or why can't we do this together? Because there are many areas we started out together. So when it became like children involved and making other decisions with the finances, that's when we're like, okay, what we view as important or priority is very different versus what we thought of years ago. And how do we make that change? And I just remember us having those conversations of, oh, you don't support me. Or he would say, you don't support me. And it's like, no, it's not that I don't support this. I don't support this idea right now, but I still love you. And I think that's where some couples end up falling short, where they think just because a person's support has changed in a particular area means they don't love them at all. Right. It's like, how can we navigate this challenge where we can kind of leave this as a non-negotiable or negotiable later on, giving time for certain challenges to take a step back. Everything doesn't need to be resolved right now. That's good. That's the challenge where it's like, okay, if it's not resolved right now, it's done. It's like, okay, you may need a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years. And we have to be okay with still loving each other, talking to each other, communicating while that challenge is being resolved. And it might not ever get resolved, but that doesn't mean we don't love each other.
This is very interesting, because I think that's where I call it is permission being given to the relationship to change, to grow, to expand, right? And so that is growth in process, and there's always growing pains that people experience. And so we don't abort that child because there's pain there, because growth is occurring. And sometimes what you're describing is this growth process. And sometimes people misinterpret growth to mean, like you just said so beautifully, you both said, lack of support, right? So I think which is really a segue to a very good question I have for you guys here, but because you guys I would be regarded as a power couple, meaning that you're both influencers and pursuing your career goals and that are life-changing for other people in what you guys do. Now, how do you do that and still make time to find a balance, right? Whatever balance means for family and everything else that's going on, because could be very challenging for some relationship that is, just don't make 16 years. So how do you do that?
Calendar, Google calendar. No, I think with both of us, we have different seasons throughout the year where it could be busy for one person, and the other person will just kind of like take the back seat and just take care of certain things. And we try to schedule in as much together time as we can during those busy seasons. Like I know for myself, during the summertime, I'm always busy because I'm touring or I'm out of town doing events or so. But then outside of the summertime, I'm basically the one that will take the backseat role while she do a lot of the things that she's doing with the show and things of that nature. But then of course there may be those small pockets where both of us are extremely busy, and it's like we're giving 100% to everything else, and we kind of push. I don't want to say neglect is not the right word, is the wrong word, but it may seem like we're neglecting each other, but we're not. It's just that we get busy. But what we normally do is, hey, we know what, we set time apart and we say, okay, you know what? We have children that we have to spend time with. So we set a day in the week. That day, we don't do anything else but handle family business. We may go to the movies, or we may do dinner and a movie at home, or we may go for a drive, get some ice cream. But it's just a time where we spend time as a family together. We're not doing nothing else, no business, no ministry, nothing, just focus on family. And lately what we've been doing is we've been going on morning breakfast date, because we realize in the evening times it's not that easy with the whole pick up and drop off process with the kids, and after work or after an event or whatever the case may be, we're tired, we're exhausted, we just want to lay down and just I'm done with this day. So early in the morning, before everything gets started, we go out on breakfast date, and that seems to be working. Kids that seemed to kind of work, and we've been doing that for quite some time now, and we've put that into our weekly routine, and it's been really good. So just a matter of developing small routines and scheduling time for each other, for your kids, and for yourself, because you don't want to give 100% to everybody and you don't give anything to yourself. And to yourself doesn't have to be, okay, you know what, I need a whole day for myself. No, it may just be go for a drive. Some days I'll just take a drive and listen to music on the highway, or I'll go and sit down at the airport and watch the airplanes. And that's my time to myself, an hour, 2 hours, just chilling and good to go. But you have to be able to schedule time in there for both self, for your spouse, and for your kids.
Definitely, I agree with that. And then also you have to be honest with each other, because what one person may view as, hey, I'm doing this for the family, the other person might not view that. So no, in certain seasons for us, he might be out event after event, back to back, and then serving at church and doing all these things, which they're noble, they're great, but it's taking time away from me and the kids, or I might be, a lot of what I've done lately, because I'm not on stage like I used to be in the past, on stage with him or just doing my thing. I had to shift to more virtual and behind the scenes. So a lot of what I do involves me behind the computer, producing, editing, and doing things like that. So it's like sometimes I could be in the same room, but just so zoned in on trying to get a project done. So it's like we have to be honest with each other. Like, okay, what you might be viewing as doing this for the family is taking time away from the family. How can we make sure that we're balancing this out in a healthy way? Because the last thing you want to be is successful on the top and then looking around and you're by yourself, So I really take a lot of notes from, succeeding where other people have failed. I'm so sorry. I have to say it, because, I've seen where couples who you see them on television, they're doing their big time interviews, but then you see their children on another interview saying, I don't know who that person is. I barely see them. I don't even know them. And I'm like, okay, well, as much as we want to attain this level of success, we have to figure out creative ways to do so where we're not neglecting each other, the family, because you see empty nesters, all these different things. I'm like taking notes. Okay, let's be careful of that. Let's be careful of that, because it's so easy to get lost in doing things for the legacy of your family and not collectively spending time feeding each other emotionally, and just talking.
I think you have highlighted a few things that I think both of you, which is so important. I think the idea of being a good student of life, a student of other people's relationship, and learning from those, right? So you can implement things in your relationship that, makes it better for you. Which is really, I think, is some of the common mistakes that people do. They don't necessarily learn from others. They don't take the time to be a student of other relationships, like you're describing so well. They don't take the time, as you're saying, Eddie, is to build time for yourself as well as the marriage, right? Even though you're parents and have kids, but the marriage is also need that nurturing. So I'm hearing that is because one of the questions I was going to ask, but you've answered the question already, is like, what are some of the common mistakes that people make in their relationship? You're describing really what you're kind of highlighting in a way, the common mistakes they make, not taking time for their marriage, not taking time for themselves, not learning from other people, right? So that's some of the common mistakes that people make. And so in the idea of mistakes, and sometimes in our relationship when things happen, right? Going back to what you said earlier and how you navigated those moments, I wonder, what role does forgiveness play in your marriage, right? In requesting, offering, and receiving forgiveness. And when you've had moments like that, how did you guys, what was it like, in either offering, receiving, or requesting it?
All right, so
I just went.
all right, so I'm from the philosophy. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "Don't let the sun go down, with anger or wrath on your heart, because you basically give." This is my paraphrase version.
Of course,
you're basically giving the devil a foothold to hold on you, because you go to sleep angry with somebody, you may wake up the following day and you're more angry for no reason. Or you may go to sleep with anger and you don't wake up, and you don't want to be remembered. The last thing, if you were to, sleep off into your sleep and be remembered as, oh yeah, he went to bed angry, and I didn't get a chance to forgive or ask for forgiveness. So when we, in our early stage of marriage, like if we had like a discussion or an argument or so, like we will not go to sleep until we hash that out, until like, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, and a lot of times I would be the bigger person and ask for forgiveness, even though it wasn't my fault.
You can still do it, right?
I'm gonna still do it because I want to go to sleep. I want to sleep good, but no. but I think forgiveness, like you have to like own up to your stuff. If you make a mistake, don't try to be all egotistic about it and all into your own feelings. Like, no, forgiveness, ask for forgiveness and keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? That way you can hash out or get rid of whatever drama or problem that could arise. Because the other person may think that, okay, you know what, they have this ideology or this idea of whatever the case may be, and they're wrong. They did something they weren't supposed to, and they're wrong for it. So instead of owning it up, they just want to be like, it is what it is, throw it under the rug like nothing never happened. Hey, own up your mess and just ask for forgiveness. Now, accepting somebody asking for forgiveness sometimes, and everybody's case is different, but sometimes can be hard, because if you're coming from the avenue of that person hurt me, it may be hard to just easily say, you know what, I forgive you. They say it's much easier said than done, but you may say, yeah, I forgive you, but I don't forget. That's realistically, that's not really forgiving, because you're still holding on to something. You're just saying it for face value. Like, oh yeah, I forgive you.
No, in all fairness,
wait, hold on. Everybody's case is different. So I'm just saying.
So in our case, we've learned the art of forgiving and accepting forgiveness. When you're wrong, you ask for forgiveness and you apologize. If somebody hurt you, you accept their apology and you learn how to forgive. So for me in the beginning, I used to say, I forgive you, but I need time to heal.
Now we're going to stop today's interview. I know you wanted to hear more, but we're going to stop today's interview. We are doing 2 parts of this episode. And so today's part 1, and we're going to stop it right here. And in part 2, which is episode number 24, you'll hear Yannick expand on why she said what she just said and what part does love play in all of this. I can tell you it's going to be juicy, and you're going to hear Eddie's version of this. So you want to make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified when part 2 comes out, right? And I want to make sure that you don't miss it. And so again, in part 2, in the next episode, number 24, we'll continue and pick up where we left off today. Remember, by simply staying to the end that you have just done, I want you to get the gift I have for you, right? So the announcer will tell you how to get your copy of this free ebook and how to stay in touch with us. But before she comes, let me invite you to check out our new website at happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com, and you'll see what's happening in our world. Okay, so with that said, let me have our announcer tell you about how to get your free ebook and how to also get in touch with us.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.